Horrendous stuff that's going on, folks. And the concerts, I mean, stuff that we're seeing at the concerts. The whole transhumanist thing and the, you know, and of course they want to push it as being the devil. As I've said before, I would suggest that the real Lucifer system is the internet. It's what's being used to suck people into the mainframe. Now, you'll get people into a state where they're just completely zombified. You get people where they're so compliant, like behaviour modification through the masks and stuff. People are just complying, they're walking between the lines, a head down coward, doing everything they're told. They give away more of their soul all the time, and eventually there's no point even being alive. You know, and then the only life they have is in this virtual world, and how easy is it to snap them into that virtual world? And if your soul is attached to your awareness, you know, the I am, you know, I am Max, I am alive. I am here experiencing reality, that knowledge. Your soul is of course attached to that. But if that's moved into the mainframe and you're in a virtual world, but you're still in the I am conscious, I am me, I am what I believe myself to be. If you're still in that state, then your soul is still attached, sort of hanging above the mainframe in limbo. This is how they trap your soul, folks. I started talking about the fact that this whole world, this whole game that we're forced to play is like a soul trap years ago, but it's also a way for us to get out. It's a way for us to escape the system. Every time this happens, every time one of these resets happens, it's a way for us to escape. It's a way for us to purify our consciousness. The reason we don't generally is because we're so scared of death. Now, we will do everything we can to avoid death. We'll like they'll just sit there and, like I said, make people walk between the lines, hobbled, cowed, doing what they're told. They're not live, they're not living. And yet they will continue to do that because they're scared of taking the next step. They're scared of what comes after this ride. You know, they're scared of death when they're really living in a state of death already, because they're not living their lives. They're not experiencing themselves to the fullest of their potential. They're not experiencing what it means to be you. That's what this whole system's about, folks. And that's what I think this whole reset is all about as well. I think they do these all the time. They've done it before, but they reduce us more and more. More and more. Each cycle, they reduce us in intellect, in capability, in spirituality, in size even. So I think all these legends and evidences we find of giants and things, you know, they do all this, they reduce us, whoever they are, they reduce us down to the point that we are now. And I think after this reset, it's going to be even worse, which is why it's so important for the knowledge that we've got to be carried through. This is one of the reasons I think that they get the whole world speaking English, because English is a really complex language. I mean, even writing it and trying to understand English is very, very complex. And there's so many different ambiguous meanings for words. People coming after this reset, trying to figure out what's written down in history books, aren't really going to have much hope of understanding what we're saying. You know, that's why it's probably good to, as I've said before, create time capsules of videos and memory sticks. And I mean, whether this technology will even exist again is another thing. But even reel-to-reels and, you know, old video stuff. If you get an old video recorder, like an old reel-to-reel video recorder, and start video recording a lot of the documentaries and things that have come out, and somehow find a way of documenting this time in order to get the information through to the other side of the reset, I think it's going to be very beneficial. I mean, I think they did that last time. We've found a lot of it. There's a lot of stuff that's come to light in the last few years. But, you know, we need to be really focused on this, I think, folks. You know, unless people are going to push back, you know, and a lot of people are asking the questions now that need to be asked. It's like that girl asking the questions at the start of the show about why is no one talking about the fact that we're living in the worst recession in history, and no one's actually talking about it. And there's other questions that people are asking, which really are questions that need to be asked.
At this point, we're living under corporate and medical fascism. This is tyranny. When do we get to use the guns? No, and I'm not, that's not a joke. I'm not saying it like that. I mean, literally, where's the line? How many elections are they going to steal before we kill these people?
Yeah, what can I say, folks? What can I say? Because we're really moving into this whole ridiculous transhumanist nightmare. And as I said, it's been totally promoted in the West. I got a bit sidetracked before. But look at the sort of stuff you're seeing at concerts these days.
God, further and beyond.
Now, is there any type of need for this type of imagery at a concert? I mean, what's that all about? Why would people be showing that sort of stuff? You could show something a bit inspiring. Even if you want to use metallic monsters or whatever, you could use something a little bit inspiring. You could use something that promotes some sort of beauty in transhumanism or something, but no, they want you to look at it as what it really is. And as I said, I would suggest that this is what the Lucifer system is, folks. This is the devil that everybody is scared of. It's what lies behind the scrying mirrors in their hand that they're using every day. And people who say they're not going to ever sign themselves over to the darkness or sign themselves over to that dark system, well, if you're using a cell phone and you're carrying it around with you everywhere, this is the scrying mirrors. These are the tools that they use for summoning that entity, that force, into this reality. And it's through the attention that people give to these things all the time. There's so many better ways of doing things, folks, and so many better things that people, and especially children, could be focused on than scrying mirrors and the internet. Yeah, but unfortunately, like I said, people don't get this information because the media doesn't. And here's the problem, folks. The media, I cannot stress enough how bad the media are, how much they are responsible for this whole situation the world is in, simply by failing at their task, their basic task. I mean, you had one job, to keep us informed. Well, two jobs, to be a watchdog of the politicians as well, but that is really part of keeping us informed. One job that you had, and all you've done is lie to the people and become the unofficial spokesperson for the government. And of course, it's because,
fortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias,
and agenda to control exactly what people think. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Yeah, you can't really say it better than they say it themselves, folks. That's what's going on. Yes, they are supporting their own agenda. We've been warning you about what they're doing to the food. All the food's just so bad for you. Anything you buy in a supermarket is so bad for you. Someone was in one of the supermarkets here in Mexico the other day, and they noticed a new type of mince on the shelf. Ground beef for people living in the United States. New type of ground beef on the shelf. And it looked really good, like it was really nice and red, and it looked like the nicest ground beef that there was. And it was just there with the other ones, but you could see it was noticeably different. And they got a little bit out of the packet and they rubbed it on their hand, and it basically disappeared into their hand. And I would suggest that they're putting 3D printed meat on the shelves, folks, and they're not labeling it and not telling you what it is. And you might want to just look out for this sort of stuff if you're out shopping. Another thing they're doing is they are creating fake eggs now.
Eggs are easily accessible and inexpensive, with egg prices in the United States at their lowest in a decade. However, according to reports from India, the country has recently experienced an inflow of fake eggs, most likely from China. And the less tasty and potentially unhealthy fakes seem so real that some people have given up eggs totally. Even the separate fake whites and yolks can be convincing once cracked because the colors and forms are similar with just minor changes. The eggs have apparently been appearing in stores and supermarkets, with some customers purchasing the fakes by mistake and then complaining about the slight changes, such as hard-to-crack shells and rubbery contents when cooked. Fake eggs have been created in China since the mid-1990s, and they could be produced at half the cost of real eggs.
Well, that's handy, isn't it? After the government told us, yeah, the eggs are no good, you've got to watch out for eggs, we need to destroy all your chickens, and you shouldn't be going and getting eggs that are free-range eggs because they could contain contaminants. Now we know why, folks. They're probably putting graphene and tracking devices and what sort of shit they're putting in the eggs. God knows what is in these things, folks. Oh my Lord. Fake eggs. I mean, how ridiculous can things be? Imagine making the shells and making the little membrane inside the shell. It'd be a tricky sort of a job to be a fake egg manufacturer. And there's also people on the positive side that are starting their own education systems within their own communities, folks. And they're advertising for teachers. This is something I've suggested for months and months and months that you need to do to get your kids out of these government indoctrination centres that are going to transgenderise your children and talk your little boy into getting his penis cut off and your little girl into having her breasts removed and totally promote dysphoria to them. And if you question this, then you're the bad guy.
In simple terms, why were you stood down from your clinical duties at the hospital?
The hospital took the opportunity to remove me from clinical duties on the grounds of being a danger to trans and gender diverse children, because I've got a history of expressing concerns about the gender clinic in the hospital and the model they're using called the affirmation model.
This affirmation model, can I paraphrase that? Tell me if it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So if a child comes in and presents with gender dysphoria, regardless of the mental state of that child, the hospital and the gender clinic just goes along with what the child wants.
Yes.
So the hospital just expected you, directed you in fact.
Directed me.
If a child was presenting with gender dysphoria, you were, no questions asked really, send them straight to the gender clinic.
Yes.
Forgive me if this is a stupid question, but how do you know if you were sending the right kids on what is an irreversible journey?
No one can know, and that's really important for parents to know, because when a child with gender dysphoria sits in front of a child psychiatrist or any mental health clinician, they have no way of knowing whether these children are going to persist in their gender dysphoria. And what's been hidden are the thousands of parents across Australia who are in anguish because they're very concerned about their child receiving care according to this affirmation model, and they're in a very difficult position, and they often can't speak out because their highest priority is to remain close to their child and to try to protect their child.
But if they keep going, they go to the gender clinics and then they start to have body parts cut off, they're never going to recover.
It's an absolute disaster, and it's so sad because child psychiatrists and other mental health clinicians are keeping quiet about their concerns. So it is creating this false impression that we all agree with the affirmation model.
You've been labelled transphobic. How do you relate to that?
I see this as a really serious child protection issue, and as a 45-year-old woman and as a mother and as a child psychiatrist, I could not hold my head up if I didn't speak about this. It's too important. And what we're talking about is the well-being of children and their health. We want kids to grow up and be happy. We all want that. We don't want them to have regrets and serious health problems.
Why do you think this has become such a significant social issue?
I think there's lots of social factors contributing. There's a very vocal social movement. But what this issue has revealed is a crisis in the published medical research. And so journals usually use a peer review process to determine if a study is accurate before publication, but that peer review process is failing. And so we're seeing very poor quality studies being published, and the conclusions drawn by their activist researchers are often the exact opposite of what the study has found. What parents really need to know is that it's a very dangerous time for children and families, and they need to be very cautious about who they let engage with their child. So what I would recommend is that they see the health professional first without the child to find out what approach they're going to take towards their child.
Do you think the hospital want to sack you?
Yes. Yes, they do.
They want you off the books?
They don't want me hanging around in the hospital.
Because as far as they're concerned, you're a troublemaker.
I guess the problem with having me in the hospital is that I become a rallying point around the issue, and it might motivate other people to raise similar concerns.
I'm struggling with the concept of seeing you as a big, bad troublemaker.
Thank you.
because you want an open-minded approach to this. That's your sin, medically.
Yes. Well, I see this as a child protection issue. I think we need to take urgent steps to figure out how interventions that are so serious and fully evidence-based have been delivered to children across Australia. And I think that we need to have a federal independent inquiry into the model of care for children with gender dysphoria in Australia.
Do you think you will get your job back or not?
Well, the lawyers seem to think that it's unlikely, but what I've discovered about myself is that I do live in a bit of denial, and I just can't imagine not being back in my office and being with those colleagues that I've been with for years.
Do you want your job back?
I do. Just in my job, I've met a lot of really courageous people, patients, and so I gain inspiration from them. And so I try and keep myself happy and strong, and I look forward to walking back in the door of the hospital.
Good luck.
Thank you.
It's absolutely the worst type of child abuse I've ever witnessed in my entire life that is now being promoted by these parasites masquerading as politicians. And we need to speak out about that. So I would get involved in that as well, folks.